As we jump into today's podcast, I have a story I want to share with you. When I was a child growing up, my parents wanted my siblings and I to have a sport, an activity that we enjoyed doing. When we lived in the Front Range of Colorado, I enjoyed karate. As most families do, we moved at some point. We moved up to the mountains, and where we were in the mountains, there wasn't a karate school. We moved up to Newcastle in the mountains. That's just about 15 minutes west of Glenwood Springs, if you're familiar with the area. They didn't have a Kempo karate studio. My mom thought it would be a good idea to replace my love for karate with bowling every year for my birthday as a kid. Since I was like 4 years old, I wanted our whole family to go out and go bowling. That was like the birthday activity that I got to choose every year. And it was really the only time out of the year that we got to go bowling. There was a bowling alley right next to the grocery store where my mom wanted to go grocery shopping. We had like one grocery store in the town, and it was just down the hill from where we lived. When she would go grocery shopping, she would drop me off at the bowling alley, and the owner of the bowling alley was kind enough to let me go in an hour before it opened, before anyone was there, and bowl one game every day. I did a summer camp with him where he had a whole bunch of kiddos come in and he taught them how to bowl. Now, by the time the years wrapped up there, I was getting more practice by doing bowling league and bowling a few games before and after. I increased how much I practiced as I continued pursuing the sport. I got to bowl in a number of excellent tournaments in and around the mountain area, in and around Newcastle, Colorado. Practicing helped me grow into being a better bowler. I started bowling league with an average of about 120 that first year. By the time we moved from Colorado to Kansas, I was averaging closer to 170, 180. After we moved to Kansas, I thought I was pretty good at bowling. I had shot well over 250 in a number of tournaments. And I was super stoked to be pursuing a perfect game. You need to know, if you've never been to Kansas, if you don't follow bowling, Kansas is like the headquarters for professional bowlers. Wichita State in particular is where most of the professional bowlers come out of. As a result, bowling is a different cultural phenomenon in Kansas than it is in Colorado. I thought that I was going to be able to roll into Kansas and be at the same level I was relative to the kids in Colorado. In order to be considered a good bowler in Kansas, even a youth bowler, you need to be averaging close to 200, if not over 200. That encouraged me to continue practicing even more. The pinnacle success that I had as a youth bowler was right after my freshman year in college. I got to go to the USBC Youth National Open. That year, it was held in Detroit, Michigan. My whole family packed up for this tournament. We drove out and made it a big family vacation. It was a good time. When we got to Detroit, I was nervous, but I had been practicing for nearly 6 or 7 years at this point. And I had been dreaming for well over 5 years of that time of going to a national tournament. And this was the moment that was going to make or break all those hours of practice, starting with going and bowling just one game a day. That year, for that one tournament, the one national tournament I'll probably ever get to bowl, I got to average 215. I've never done that well over a series of games averaging in league, nor in a tournament ever since. I think I finished in the top 12.5% of U20 bowlers in the United States. And that was a satisfying accomplishment for me. The one other thing that I got to do with bowling that compared was the time I got very, very close to the perfect game. A perfect game is 12 strikes in a row. I was in bowling league, bowling with my friends. It was just a normal day in league. I really, really wanted to do well this day. I practiced so much, and I wanted any day to be the first day I bowled a 300. I didn't care if it was across 2 games, like you start striking in the 4th or 5th frame of the first game, and then you finish 12 strikes later somewhere into the second game. It was I believe the last game of the day. I left the 10 pin and I missed the spare. I remember walking away after, that first frame, it was a failure. I felt like I had failed, but I had a good attitude about it. I'd done this a number of times. I said, there's still a lot of game left. I could get the rest of them as strikes and make this a high game. One shot after another. Cool, calm, methodical repetition. The result of my practice, I got 2 strikes in a row, 4 strikes in a row, 8 strikes in a row. After 10 strikes in a row, I had exceeded my previous best. And I got that 11th one. I had a missed spare on frame 1, and the rest of the game was strikes. To this day, it's the best game that I've ever been able to do. I really wanted it to be 12 strikes in a row, though, so I went up and I bought 1 extra frame. 1 extra frame after league. I just needed to throw 1 more strike. And it was just like all 12 of my previous shots. And the result was the same as the first one. I left 1 pin. I made a giant 11-strike, 10-pin sandwich. I've got a little trophy. It's actually sitting on my desk here, representing that. It says 279, April 5th, 2014. I like to call this my I almost did it, or you almost made it trophy. It says 11 in a row. It's a fancy crystal. If you listen to the podcast audio only, you can't see it. But if you're watching on YouTube, I held it up for the camera. If you follow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, we also filmed this podcast recording and put it on YouTube. I don't have anything that is required on there that you need to see in order to appreciate the podcast. But if you want to see my little USB-C trophy, it's on YouTube. So be sure to follow us there. What I learned from my time in bowling as a youth bowler was that practice was incredibly important. And in order to succeed, you needed to put in a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of practice. And it doesn't matter what you do. If you're not practicing, you're not going to succeed. The example that I love giving when it comes to practice beyond my personal experience with bowling is if you're going to go and run a marathon, you can do one of 2 things. You can get outside and you can practice. You can run every day. I mean, maybe take a day or 2 here and there for letting your body rest and recoup. But you can practice and you can build up the endurance. Or you can sit back and think about it. You can think about running. You can watch videos of other people running. You can mentally prepare yourself. But if you don't practice and you take your out-of-shape self that didn't practice and you go try to run a marathon, you may not make it to the finish line. You may walk there, but you're not going to do near as well as the person who went outside and ran every day. This is going to be the case in personal finance as well. We're going to continue that thought when we get to our main topic.